So.
Today, I'm going to tell you two stories that both have very unexpected killers. But before we get into those stories, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place because that's all we do, and we upload once a week. So, if that's of interest to you, please give the like button a brand new signed copy of Mr. Ballen's brand new graphic novel, Where Nightmares Live. But make sure you first rip out one page from each story. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Okay, let's get into today's stories.
Hey! Yo! Hey! That's wrong. That's wrong.
On the morning of September 12, 2007, 20-year-old Ashley Wallace was in her dorm room at Bryant and Stratton College in Buffalo, New York, getting ready for her very first day of classes. And this was really exciting for her. I mean, she had just moved out on her own for the first time. It feels like she's an adult here. And so today was a big day. She looked herself in the mirror and made sure her look was just right. She gathered up all her books and her journals and all the stuff she would need. And then once she was ready, she began heading towards the door. But before she got there, she heard a knock on her door. And Ashley felt sort of confused, like she hadn't lived here long enough for people to actually know she lived here. So who would be coming to visit her? And she certainly didn't have any plans to see anybody today. And so she's thinking, like, I have no idea who could be at my door right now. So she walks to the door, she opens it up, and she is truly shocked now to see who's standing there. But her shock quickly turns into fear. So there were two police officers standing in the hallway looking right at Ashley, and the looks on their faces were very serious. Now, Ashley, the reason she felt so scared when she saw these police officers was not because she had, done something wrong. It was because in her life, before she got to college, she had experienced some pretty severe trauma. So her father had passed away when she was 13, a sudden heart attack, and it had been very traumatic for her. It sort of threw the family for a loop. And then her mother had remarried, and her stepfather, who had, raised her from that point on, he had sort of struggled with depression on and off, and it seemed like he was doing okay, but not long after her biological father had suddenly died, her stepfather took his own life.
Jesus!
So once again, Ashley and her family's lives were turned upside down. And so in many ways, Ashley had not really recovered from those two losses. Those happened not that long ago. And now she was out here on her own, trying to be an adult, trying her best to stay composed. But she just had this awful feeling when she saw these police officers that they were there to tell her that, somebody else close to her had died. But when the officers actually began speaking to Ashley, it was clear they were not here to notify her about, a new death. But they were here to talk about her family. They told her that they were there to speak to her about her father, her biological father, who had passed away 7 years earlier. And so when they said that to Ashley, she was like, okay, what do you mean? What do you want to know about my dad? And they told her that, Ashley, we exhumed your father. And it turns out he very likely did not die of a heart attack. We think he was murdered.
Oh!
About 30 minutes later, when these...
Okay. So what would make them think that, though? Obviously, I have to keep the story going, but this is the one that he said, unexpected killer. So the mom is too obvious. The daughter is too obvious. I mean, it's an option. They're suspects. I'm just saying. Unexpected. Maybe they had a pet, and the pet actually accidentally did something. Oh no, I'm trying to think. They think he was murdered though, so I don't know.
Officers had finally left Ashley's room. Ashley was left feeling completely distraught. I mean, number one, she just found out that there is suspicion that her father was killed by somebody. But worse than that was these two officers who had been here were not here to console Ashley. They were here to effectively interrogate her. They were looking into the family to see if, Ashley was involved in what happened to her father. And so for Ashley, this had really caught her off guard. She felt like she was stammering and confused in all of her answers, which only made her seem more suspicious. And it was like every little misstep she had, the police would dial in and ask even more pointed questions. And by the end of it, she was just sobbing and telling them, like, I didn't do this. I didn't hurt my dad. I have no idea who would do that. And so eventually the police had gotten up and left. But they told Ashley they were going to be in touch, and then they were gone. And so Ashley's just left there in her room, wondering what she...
What if it's the stepdad, like the new stepdad? Because he took his own life. Maybe he took his own life because he couldn't bear all the things that he did to the real biological father.
To do now. She thought about, sucking it up and just going to class, but she's thinking, like, how can I possibly focus on class right now when I've just learned what I've learned and had this horrible experience with the police? And so Ashley ended up calling her mother, and her mother was obviously very upset when she picked up, even before Ashley said anything. And Ashley quickly learned that her mother also had a sort of similar experience with police that day. That she had also been told that, her husband apparently had been killed, and they were now investigating her to see if maybe she had something to do with it. And so the two women just sort of cried on the phone, and they began saying, like, I just don't understand. Like, who would want to hurt him? It just doesn't make any sense. Like, they've got to be wrong. Like, none of this makes any sense. And so eventually, Ashley's mother, whose name was Stacey, just told her daughter to come home, forget about classes, we can deal with that stuff later, just come home, be with your family. Ashley agreed that was the most reasonable thing to do here, and so she grabbed her stuff, she left the dorm, hopped in her car, and she drove the hour back to her mom's place. And when she gets there and she goes inside, the first person she sees is actually her younger sister, Bree, who was 16 years old. And Bree's eyes were red, she obviously had been crying, and in the first couple of seconds they spoke, it was clear that Bree, too, had had a sort of rough interaction with police as well that day. And so it's like the whole family has been thrust into this chaotic moment that none of them can make any sense of. On the one hand, it's like, who would want to hurt dad? But on the other, it's like, did this really happen? Is this a mistake? Like, why did they exhume his body in the first place? Like, what's going on here? There was just so much unknown. And so that afternoon, Ashley, her sister Bree, and their mom just retreated to their mother's kitchen. And there they mostly cried together and just sort of talked through this horrible situation. But eventually, later in the day, when the tears had sort of stopped flowing and reality had set in, that this was now a very complicated situation, if nothing else. I mean, basically they were all under investigation for the potential murder of their father/husband, and they sort of didn't know what was going to happen next. But there was a lot of stress around, the next couple of days, they didn't know. And so under all this stress, Stacey, the mom, was like, you know what? I'm getting a drink. Do any of you guys want a drink? And Bree was only 16 and she declined. But Ashley said sure. She was 20, not 21 yet, but...
Okay, so we have the sister. She's 16, Bree. And we still have... Granted, he's dead. But we still have the new stepfather. That, it could lead to him, but it's not much that they can do, But... The sister is definitely, everybody's a suspect at this point. And if they have a pet, they sus too.
She was drinking at this point, and so she said, yep, I'll take a drink. And so Stacey mixed some drinks for her and Ashley, as well as a non-alcoholic drink for Bree. And so for the rest of the night, the girls just sat in the kitchen having their drinks and trying hard not to let this horrible situation totally wreck them. The next morning, when Ashley woke up inside of her mother's house, she found she was
What if they all did it? The mom and the two sisters. Oh my God.
Hungover. Now, she obviously had had some drinks the night before with her mom and her sister, but she was thinking to herself, like, the level of hungover she was feeling felt disproportionate. Like, she was really hungover despite a relatively small amount of alcohol. But Ashley was wondering if maybe part of the reason she felt so bad was not just a hangover. Maybe it was like this emotional fallout from this horrible thing that happened the day before. And so Ashley, she's laying in bed feeling so bad, and she's just convincing herself that I just need to get up, I need to go to my classes, I need to sort of treat the day like a normal day and sort of get my life back together and be ready to potentially deal with police or, whatever else is going to happen here. And so Ashley sort of wills herself out of bed. She's got a blinding headache. She feels horrible, but nonetheless, she takes a shower, she gets herself together, and before long, she's saying bye to her mom and sister, and she's driving back to the campus. And when she gets there, she still feels terrible, but, she goes to her classes, and she does her best to focus, which really turned out to be a gargantuan task, but she did it. And then finally, at the end of the day, during her last class, Ashley began to sort of break out of this fog, this hangover fog that she was in, and she began sort of feeling normal again. And so by the time she left the lecture hall and was done for the day, she actually felt good enough that she hopped right back in her car and drove right back to her mother's house. And that night, again, just like the night before, she, her sister, and her mom just sat in the kitchen, just sort of having this cathartic moment together, crying together, talking about their dad, sharing memories, sharing theories, and also having a few drinks. And again, Bree did not have any alcohol, but Ashley and her mother did. The next morning, when Ashley woke up, once again, her head was pounding.
I'm like, hey, Ma! Ma! It's the second time now I had a little bit of alcohol, but I woke up with the meanest headache. I'm hung over like a mother clucker. What's up? What's up? I can't be that loud. What's up?
So hungover, way worse than the day before. Except when she opened her eyes and kind of looked around, that really was not the first thing that hit her. The first thing that hit her is, I don't know where I am. The room looked different. And as she kind of adjusted and looked around, she realized she was in a hospital room. And so Ashley began to panic and began looking around for her family or anybody she recognized, but nobody that she knew was in there. There were just these two police officers sitting against the wall in her room. And these two officers, when they saw Ashley coming to, they got up and they walked over to her and they explained to her that she was very lucky that her mother had actually found her in her bed at her mother's house that morning, and Ashley had been unresponsive. And so her mother had called an ambulance and they had rushed her here, and luckily she was stabilized now, but apparently she was very close to full-blown organ failure. Like, she almost died. It was very lucky she got here when she did.
Damn.
But before Ashley could ask any questions, well, what was it that was causing my body to shut down? Like, what's going on here? These two police officers kind of looked at each other, and then one of them pulled a piece of paper out of their pocket, and they handed it to Ashley. And they said, you need to explain yourself. It would turn out the way Ashley's stepfather had taken his own life was by drinking antifreeze. At least that was the initial theory. But pretty quickly, investigators started to say, why would somebody take their own life that way?
Yeah. Who the hell says, you know what? Let me go ahead and put this bowl of Cinnamon Toast Crunch, because that's the best cereal hands down out of all cereals. Let me go ahead and put that bowl of cereal down. Let me get this bottle of antifreeze that I have sitting right here. Just out of the blue, just random as hell. Let me go ahead and just top that off. Like, what? What?
Antifreeze is slow and painful. That's not a good first choice if you're going to take your own life. And so as suspicions rose around the stepfather, investigators thought, okay, well, the biological father died just a few years before, and apparently he died of a heart attack, but maybe we ought to make sure, because we're basically suggesting that maybe somebody did this to the stepfather. Is it possible somebody, killed the biological father? And so they exhumed the biological father, and during the autopsy, they discovered antifreeze in his remains. And so now, fast forward to the hospital, where Ashley has woken up. These officers have walked over to her, they've handed her a note, and told her to explain herself. And this note was effectively a confession. The writer of this note said they killed Ashley's biological father, and then they also killed Ashley's stepfather. But now, because of the blood on their hands, they're going to take their own lives. So this was a suicide note / confession. And at the bottom of this note, it was signed by Ashley. Except, Ashley did not kill her father or stepfather. Her mother did. Her mother used antifreeze to poison and kill both men, and then when police began poking around saying, what's going on here? We think somebody killed this guy and maybe him too. Well, what did Ashley's beloved mother do? She tried to poison her own daughter. She laced those alcoholic drinks they were having in her kitchen with all these painkillers to make it look like Ashley had taken her own life because she felt so guilty about murdering these two men. Except Ashley's mother called the ambulance a little bit too early the following day, feigning that she had just found her daughter unresponsive, because the ambulance, they showed up, and first responders, they saved Ashley's life, narrowly. Apparently, she was within 15 minutes of dying when she showed up at the hospital. Stacey was convicted of 2 murders, as well as the attempted murder of her daughter, and she was sentenced to 51 years in prison. However, she would die behind bars in 2016.
Damn. I wonder why she did that.
Around lunchtime on March 31st, 2010, a man in his mid-50s named John Schmeier was sitting at a table with a bunch of his friends inside of a Hooters restaurant in the small city of York, Pennsylvania.
Hooters!
So John was a retired eye doctor. He'd had a very successful career, made a bunch of money, and his friends that were at this table with him were also, pretty successful guys, sort of like mid to upper tier professionals with very successful careers too. But what they were doing today had nothing to do with career. This was pure pleasure. This group of guys, this specific group of friends who were very, very close, they would meet up, a couple times a month at this particular Hooters. They would sit at the same table, they would order the same things. They loved it. It was sort of like their little clubhouse. And in fact, they had even come up with a name for, this group of friends. They called themselves the Orange Shorts Society.
Wow.
And so the reason they did that is because Hooters has a sort of vibe to it that if you've been there, you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you haven't been there, basically the waitresses dress in very scantily clad clothing, and they all wear these sort of iconic white tank tops and orange shorts. And so basically these men were sort of joking that they were the Orange Short Society because of the shorts these women would all wear. And so that afternoon, John and the rest of the members of the Orange Short Society all sat around chatting and, BSing with each other, just being guys. And at some point...
I got something to say. I worked at Chipotle. Y'all know this. I worked at Chipotle. And out of all the years I've worked there, out of all the locations I've ever worked at, it was always something going down. Either during the shift or before the shift, like before we open or after we close. It was always something going down sexually. I don't know what it is about the kitchen, but it's just something. It's something in the kitchen atmosphere that makes niggas just do stuff. But I can imagine working at Hooters. Like, shit. You lying to yourself, and you lying to me, and you lying to any and everybody if you say nothing ever goes down at Hooters. Bullshit. It's a restaurant. And they got the girls out. Come on. They got the cheeks out, man. Come on. I know their rules gotta be strict like a mother.
On brought up a subject that the rest of the society was accustomed to him bringing up, and that was his ex-wife, Monica. So all of his friends knew that John had been married to Monica for 20 years, but then they got divorced in 2003, so 7 years earlier. But still, Monica was a thorn in John's side because he had to pay her alimony. And, he understood that comes with the territory of divorce. It is what it is. But Monica had made the way John paid her the alimony really cumbersome. And John was convinced, as he would tell his buddies in the Orange Short Society, that it was totally intentional. that she had made it cumbersome. She wanted it to be hard. She didn't like John, and she was punishing him. And so what Monica did is
okay, y'all was married for 20 years. Me and my wife, we've been together for 5 years and married for a year and a half. A year and 6 months. I don't, for y'all to be married for that long and y'all get a divorce after that long, I know somebody that's in the process of getting a divorce in real life. Jesus. How do y'all let it get that long? That's a big chunk of your life.
John literally each week take cash out of an ATM, put it in an envelope, and then physically drive it to her house and drop it off.
Wow.
She would not accept payment any other way.
Wow.
And the reason she was able to do that is because she claimed she did not have a bank account, and she couldn't be forced to make a bank account. And so either John made these cumbersome payments in cash, or he risked not making the payment at all, and then she could come after him legally.
Wow.
So he was sort of trapped, making this trek once a week to hand over cash to his ex-wife, who he really couldn't stand. Now, their divorce was not...
So no matter what happens, transportation-wise, I just gotta get it to you once a week. Car broke down, oh damn. Bus broke down, oh damn. Some going over Uber, Lyft, taxi, damn. Come on. Oh. Yo, paying anything to your ex-spouse after a divorce is crazy. What?
Contentious. The two of them just sort of drifted apart. They stopped seeing eye to eye. And actually, Monica really didn't like the whole orange shorts society thing. She thought it was totally scummy, and that John and his buddies were just kind of gross for going to that restaurant and sort of making jokes about, what these women are wearing and making that part of their identity, the orange shorts society. She didn't like it. And so they just kind of drifted apart. That was all it was. But now it had become this sort of bitter feud between the two of them. And so at the same time that John and his buddies in the Orange Shorts Society are sitting in the restaurant and John is going on his tirade once again about Monica's alimony, simultaneously on the other side of town, police rushed to Monica's house. Minutes earlier, there had been a 911 call that came from Monica's house, but when the operator answered, there was no answer. And so by protocol, they had just sent first responders out to the house to see if whoever had called was okay. And so the police, they get to Monica's house, they park, they go right up to the front door, they're knocking on the door, there's no answer, they're looking around, there's no sign of forced entry, no sign of anything really going on here. It's just a quiet day in the neighborhood. But they go to the door again, they knock a few more times, and when there's no answer, they try the doorknob, and it's unlocked. So they open the door up, and right away, they look in, and there's Monica. And she's dead on the ground with the phone right next to her, and she's been shot in the head. Shortly after this discovery, the lead detective, Douglas Demagon, along with his team, began to survey the crime scene. And they quickly found a purse next to Monica's body, and inside was her license. That was how they identified her. And then they also found a .32 caliber shell casing lying near the body that clearly seemed to be from the round that struck her in the head and killed her. But perhaps the most unusual aspect of this crime scene had really nothing to do with the body. It was all the money that they found all over the house. Okay. Specifically cash in envelopes. There were these envelopes in trash cans and drawers.
Okay, I'm trying to pause it. I'm trying to think about who the person that actually shot her. It's not who I would expect. So it's definitely not any of the guys that's in that orange society. I wonder if they paid one of the Hooters waitresses to do it. With a certain amount of money, you'll do anything.
Tables, it was kind of like all over the place. Some out in the open, some hidden. But there was lots of money stashed in this home. And so Demagon and the other investigators, began to wonder if, okay, maybe this was a robbery and Monica got killed in the process. But it's like, okay, if it was a robbery, why is there so much cash out in the open, literally packaged up in envelopes, easy to, remove from the house? Why is it all here? It's almost like no cash was taken, or certainly not very much was taken, and also other valuables are still in place. It didn't have the feel of somebody ransacking the house. It just sort of felt like somebody came in here and killed Monica. Detective Demagon and his team searched the whole house, and they couldn't find any sign of forced entry. So basically, whoever came in here and did this either, just walked in because a door or window was unlocked, or maybe Monica let them in, maybe she knew who they were, or they had a key. Detective Demagon asked the forensics team to begin sweeping the house for DNA to see if maybe they could find something that could show them who had been here lately. And so while that team got started, Demagon continued to walk around the house, and he eventually found a Rolodex, which is basically like a big book full of phone numbers and addresses. And as the detective was flipping through that book, that was how he discovered that Monica had an ex-husband, John Schmeier. That evening, Detective Demagon and another investigator rolled up to John Schmeier's house. Right. They walked up to the front door and they knocked, and then a moment later, the door opened, and John was standing there looking very surprised. So in homicide cases, generally speaking, the spouse or ex-spouse is always suspect number one. And so even though Demagon didn't really have any evidence linking John to the crime, he did have the fact that this was her ex-spouse, and so therefore, he is suspicious. Before John could ask any questions, Demagon and his partner introduced themselves and said they'd like to come in and speak to John. So John said, okay, come on in. So they walked inside, they sat down, and then once they were seated, Detective Demagon watched John very closely as he told him why they were there. Basically, your ex-wife has been murdered, and we're here to talk to you about it. Detective Demagon wanted to see if John would have a big reaction or maybe a subdued reaction. Whatever reaction he might have could be telling to how involved he maybe was or wasn't in this case. When Demagon told John that Monica had been shot to death, John's reaction was huge. His eyes went wide, he clutched at his chest like he was having a heart attack.
I know you didn't do it, but come on. Y'all genuinely did not like each other. You acting like that, come on.
Kind of leaned forward and began sobbing. When he came back up again, the detective noticed there were no tears in John's eyes. It was just this sort of huge reaction, but Demagon couldn't really tell if it was genuine or not. He also didn't have a baseline for John. He didn't know if this was normal, but this seemed really dramatic, almost like he might be acting. So instead of trying to console John, Demagon just asked point blank, where were you earlier this afternoon at the time of the shooting? And when he asked this, John, who still was sort of rocking back and forth and grabbing his chest and acting very upset, he suddenly stopped, put his hands by his side, and just said, oh, I was at Hooters with my friends. A few days later, Detective Demagon went to the Hooters, where John and his friends would always meet up, and he asked the manager to see the security footage from the previous Wednesday, the day of the shooting. So by this point, Demagon had actually already interviewed all of the friends who had been at the Hooters with John, the so-called Orange Shorts Society, and he had asked them all about John. Like, had he really been there? What was he doing? What was he saying? And they all said John absolutely was there the whole time. Like, there's no way he could have left and done anything to Monica. He was here with us. I promise you he was here. Now, they would admit to the detective that, John did speak disparagingly about Monica. He would talk about how mad he was about her alimony, and he definitely didn't like her very much. But that was it. That was the extent of his hatred. Now, despite how convincingly these friends said John was there the whole time, he couldn't have done this, Demagon still needed proof. He needed to really see that John had been here when he said he was here. So John went to the manager, they pulled up the security footage from the previous Wednesday, and wouldn't you know it, there's John. He comes in, he sits down, he's with his buddies, and he is there the whole time, during the time that Monica was killed. And so at this point, Demagon did feel like it sort of was impossible that John actually went and killed Monica. But given the contention between them, John apparently really doesn't like Monica. He hates making these payments to her. Like, there's obvious friction that comes up at these Orange Short Society meetings all the time. Maybe it was possible that John, who was pretty well off, had a bunch of money, maybe he hired somebody to do his dirty work for him. Maybe he hired a hitman. And so over the next week or so, Demagon and his team began exploring this hitman lead, and they found that John had been taking out a whole bunch of cash over the last several weeks, but it sort of lined up with how much cash he owed Monica in the form of alimony, and they knew he had to, per Monica's orders, deliver this alimony payment in cash to her in these envelopes, and they found all those envelopes of cash at Monica's house, and so it seemed like that was all he was doing, taking money out to give to Monica. And so John was basically Demagon's only suspect at this point, and there was basically no evidence against him. And so Demagon knew he really needed to look into other leads here, like the John lead, kind of going nowhere. And so he and his team began looking into local gang activity and, crimes in the area. Could this have just been random or something completely unrelated? But after 3 months of looking for any connection anywhere in the area, there wasn't one. And the case kind of came to a stall. And so at this point, Demagon decided that the only thing he could do realistically was just kind of start over, go back to square one, and basically re-examine all the evidence all over again. And that included going back and looking at the security footage from the Hooters on that Wednesday when the Orange Short Society was there. And so Demagon, he sat down, he starts watching this tape over and over and over again. It's like the 1,000th time he's looked at this grainy footage, and suddenly something stands out to him. Something he missed all the other times he looked. And as he replayed the footage over and over again, he realized he now knew almost certainly what happened to Monica. It would turn out the footage of the Orange Short Society meeting did hold the secret to Monica's murder. John Schmeier did not kill his ex-wife, nor did he hire a hitman to do it. He really had nothing to do with her death. The only thing he did do is, at these Orange Short Society meetups, he would talk openly about how he didn't really like Monica. In particular, he resented the fact that she was making him deliver all this cash to her to pay his alimony payments. It just felt totally cumbersome. But that meant John, on a regular basis, was telling these men in the Orange Short Society that Monica was flush with cash. He was giving her tons of cash every single week. This woman has so much cash at her house.
Oh.
And eventually, one of the Orange Short Society members, a man named Tim Jacoby, decided, you know what? I'm going to go to Monica's house and I'm going to take that cash. Demagon had been operating under the assumption that all the men who were present on that Wednesday meetup at Hooters, the Orange Short Society, that was the totality of the group. Those were all the members. Because the way the men talked about their group was they all meet up every single time. Same group, same seats, same restaurant. And so Demagon assumed, okay, then it's the same people. This is it. This is the totality of the group. Everybody is accounted for. But no. On the day of the murder, one regular member of the Orange Short Society was not present, Tim Jacoby. And that is the discrepancy that Demagon caught when he watched that footage for the 1,000th time. He realized, wait a minute, there's another guy. I heard another guy's name, Tim Jacoby. He's not here. Police would later tie Tim to the crime scene with DNA evidence. They determined that Tim went to her house with the intention of robbing her, but when Monica fought back, he shot and killed her and then fled without taking any money. Tim was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to death. He is currently on death row in Pennsylvania.
Jesus! He did all of that. And you can't take the money with you.
Thank you.
That is so crazy. He did all of that fighting, just for him to leave the house without no money. And now you're about to be dead, And it's just like, you can't take the money with you, so what do you think was gonna, what if you could actually take the money with you? I feel like if you can take physical cash with you, in the afterlife, do you know how much more dangerous that would be? I think. I'm just saying. Jesus. But even before you got caught, you fled the house without no money. Jesus. Hey, I'm not gonna lie. This is a perfect example of whoa. Let me see. both of these stories are perfect examples of you can't trust everybody. No matter if they friends, no matter if they coworkers, no matter if they family, like you don't know what somebody's intentions are. That's why you can't be saying too much. You can't be doing too much. You know? That first sign of the first story, where she had like a little bit of alcohol, but she woke up with the meanest headache. She woke up with the meanest hangover. Yeah, no, we good. We good, mama. We good, mama. Now I just see how you work. You on some clock stuff. Okay, got it. Keep cool, keep it classy. And I love you. Stay happy. My family.